As we enter this Memorial Day weekend, President Trump yesterday was talking about some of the costs of the war, specifically about the number of U.S. service members lost in the war in Iran.
You lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers in these various wars. In two wars, Venezuela, where we lost nobody, and here we lost 13 people. Now, 13 people is 13 too much, but we lost 13 people. In other wars, you lost hundreds of thousands of people. So people don't like it when you say, oh, do you know you've lost 13? We've lost in two major wars. We took over Venezuela. We essentially took over Iran. And we've lost so far 13 people. Somebody else would have lost 100,000 people. Okay? But I get a kick when I look at somebody on television. He's lost 13 people. I lost 13 people. They lost 13 people leaving an airport.
President Trump talking about the 13 American service members killed in this war so far. Let's bring in decorated combat veteran, former commander of U.S. Army Europe, retired Army Lieutenant General Mark Herdling. He is an MS Now military analyst. General, always good to see you. Obviously, President Trump is comparing this war to massive years-long ground wars in Europe and in Asia and around the world. But I'm curious, just first of all, before we start talking about Memorial Day, and I really want to get your thoughts about that, just about the state of this war and what you hope is the best possible outcome of a negotiation here.
Well, you know, it was interesting listening to Admiral Cooper testify the other day, because he repeatedly talked about the potential for new military operations during his congressional testimony. In each one of the cases where he was asked about how do we end this, he said, well, we've got different courses of action. We're prepared to do whatever the president wants us to do. In the Gulf, we have military courses of action. But when he was pressed on exactly the question you asked me, Willie, he was hesitant to answer. He said, well, those are policy decisions. I don't get into policy. I just get into military action. And truthfully, he's right on target to a degree. But you also have to understand, as a military commander, you have to continue to think about the end state. What are we trying to achieve? What course of action will get you there? And as Richard Haass just said, there is the potential for both sides walking away from their maximalist demands, which are at the very opposite ends of the spectrum. But it's going to be very difficult, and it's going to take a lot of diplomatic pressure. Effectiveness and efficiency in war, especially with the U.S. military machine, can happen very quickly. Wars can start easily. They can consume a lot of resources and equipment and a lot of manpower. They can do the things the president wants them to do very fast. But in this case, we're talking about an end to the war. And no matter how quickly you start a war, wars take a long time to end. And what we're talking about now is diplomatic actions, like Richard just said. Those could take months or years. And they're not going to come together just because of an intimidation campaign or continued threats to use more military force. We haven't seen that work so far. There have been some, certainly, deterioration of Iran's military, but that's not enough, and it's only hardened them to stand up longer to us.
Yeah, and Mika, I'm told by senior advisors the president, has not ruled out resuming hostilities, but it's very clear he doesn't want to do that. And now he's going to have to try to come to some sort of deal that he can spin as a win. Now, let's be clear. He will say anything he gets will be a win. That's what he does. But, if he ends up settling for something that really resembles what the Obama administration had agreed to a decade ago, that is going to be a hard one for him to live with. And I do think, to Richard's point, at this point, it is inevitable that Iran will have more control, either explicit or implicit, over the Strait of Hormuz. And first of all, it'll be months before energy prices return to where they were before the war. And Iran may benefit from this. They may profit off of control of the Strait. And at minimum, they now know at any time they want to close it, they can, and they can inflict real economic pain on the rest of the world. So it is hard to see an end to this war, which President Trump is desperate to achieve, that leaves us in a better place than where it began.
I mean, it may end with Iran having more leverage and energy prices up and tens of billions of dollars spent on it. You just wonder how this lends politically, even even with Trump's base, when polls are showing his handling of the economy, people are thumbs down. 71% disapprove of the job he's doing on the economy, 5 points higher than last month, 15 points higher than a year ago. It'll be interesting to see if his base or Republicans in general are on board with this, which appears to be going in the wrong direction. General, you reflect on Memorial Day in a new piece for The Bulwark titled "The Last Full Measure Quietly Remembered." And you write, quote, "I watch as most of America marks the weekend as the unofficial beginning of summer, cookouts and baseball games, long weekends, beaches, family gatherings, flags fluttering from porches, and social media posts wishing everyone a happy Memorial Day. And there is nothing wrong with any of that. But for some Americans, especially the veterans who have stood in combat zones, besides those who sacrificed it all and family members who suffered the pain of the knock on a door, it arrives very differently. For those who have attended memorial ceremonies on dusty airfields in Iraq, Afghanistan, and even still Vietnam, or who escorted transfer cases draped in flags, or who listened to bagpipes while rifles stood inverted beside combat boots and helmets under a fading sunset, Memorial Day is not abstract patriotism. It is deeply personal. Perhaps on this Memorial Day, as Americans from every background gather, we might do something that's becoming rare in our divided age. Come together quietly as one nation and reflect on what courageous sacrifice for one another truly means. Remember them, honor them, and above all, make it happen. General, maybe add some footnotes to that beautiful piece.
Well, thanks, Mika. This has become a yearly tradition for me to talk on cable news about the soldiers, sailors, and airmen, as well as allies that either I served alongside or commanded in multiple combat tours, because I have a box full of them, and that was the picture on that first visual that you showed. And the box is right here, by the way. It's on my desk. And it says "Make It Matter" on the top. General Dempsey, General Scaparrotti, and I all have that box. I have 250 cards with photos of soldiers I served alongside who made the ultimate sacrifice. I watched John Kirby on your show yesterday, a dear friend of mine. We've done a lot of things together. He was in Iraq with me for a short period of time. And he's a hell of a sailor, as well as a great national security advisor. And he talked about an individual that he wears a bracelet for. And all of us have those kind of memories of people we served alongside that were the best of us, that provided the ultimate sacrifice in terms of what they did for the country. That picture you're showing now is from Margraten Cemetery in the Netherlands, one of my favorite places to visit when I was U.S. commander in Europe. About 8,000 soldiers rest in peace there, from different religions, different backgrounds. And it talks to us about what we should do, because every single one of those 8,000 plus graves have been adopted by Dutch citizens. They helped the American Battle Monument Commission take care of those grave sites. They're there on special occasions, hundreds of them. And when my wife and I asked one family that was standing above a grave, "Why do you do this?" They said, "Because these young men and women saved us. They liberated us, not once, but twice." Those individuals from the Netherlands have a better concept of service and sacrifice, I think, than sometimes many Americans do, and the courage to stand up for it as well, the courage to stand up for what we believe in and our values. So that's what I'm thinking about today. I picked out a couple of cards from my box that were killed in action over 10 years ago, over 15 years ago, actually now, and wondering where each one of them would be today, what their family would be like, as opposed to missing them at high school graduations or dinner tables or special occasions. And you see how much they sacrificed, and what we have to do is make it matter for them. We have to earn what we have as a nation. And sometimes we forget that in our current environment of contention and anger and a lack of understanding of listening to other people. So Memorial Day is certainly a day to remember those who gave their last full measure, but I would suggest it's also a day for the rest of us to think about how we can make it matter for our country today, not just fighting with other people and sharing our opinions versus facts, but really digging deep down and saying, how can we make this country better as opposed to continuing to divide it?